she's just a strong woman that I admire, and it's been really fun. I'd much rather share the court with her every single time the ball gets tipped up. So.
In the quiet warmth of the Clark family kitchen in West Des Moines on a snowy January evening in 2025, Caitlin Clark sat at the familiar worn wooden table, her hair loosely tied back, a cup of herbal tea cooling beside her laptop as she reviewed a stack of grant applications for her foundation, unaware that this moment would become one of the most defining of her life. Her father, Brent, stood in the doorway, his weathered hands resting against the frame, his eyes filled with a quiet emotion that years of stoicism as a father and coach had seldom allowed him to show. He had watched his daughter shatter records, bring packed arenas to their feet, and elevate women's basketball to new heights. Yet as he saw her now, her brows knit in empathy while reading letters from struggling families, he felt something deeper than pride. It was the profound, almost spiritual realization that what mattered most about his daughter had nothing to do with points or trophies. Slowly, he walked over and placed a trembling hand on her shoulder, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Caitlin, this is who you were always meant to be. Watching you care more about helping others than yourself. It's bigger than basketball, sweetheart. It's everything." She looked up at him, startled by the emotion in his voice, and in that exchange of glances, something unspoken passed between them. The understanding that her journey had come full circle, not as an athlete seeking glory, but as a human being fulfilling a promise made long before she even realized it existed. For Brent, this moment carried the weight of a secret he had kept for 13 years, a quiet vow made to himself. Hen Caitlin was 12, after one of those long, exhausting tournaments where she had dazzled everyone with her skill yet returned home burdened by expectations no child should bear. It had been a summer night in 2014, the Iowa air thick with humidity and the scent of grass after rain, when he had found her sitting on the back porch, still in her team hoodie, her trainers dusty, her gaze lost in the stars. "Dad," she had asked softly, "why do people make such a big deal about basketball? It's just a game." Her question had startled him, not because it was naive, but because it revealed a depth of perception he hadn't expected from someone so young. Sitting beside her, he had taken a long breath, choosing his words with the care of a man who knew that what he said next might shape her forever. "You're right, sweetheart," he'd said quietly. "It's just a game, but sometimes God gives people special talents not so they can be famous, but so they can use them to make the world a little better." Caitlin had nodded, not fully understanding, but those words had taken root somewhere deep within her. That night, after she went to bed, Brent stood in the yard beneath the starlit sky and made himself a promise that no matter how far she went, no matter how much attention or opportunity came her way, he would remind her again and again that her true measure of greatness would never be found in statistics or headlines, but in how she used her gifts to lift others. He carried that vow like a quiet compass through the years that followed, through early morning drives to tournaments, the sound of bouncing basketballs echoing in empty gyms, the long road trips where they shared dreams between gas stations and fast food stops. The following decade tested that promise in ways Brent had never anticipated. As Caitlin's star rose, first in high school, then at Iowa, then across America, he sometimes feared that the noise of fame would drown out the gentle lessons of empathy and humility H had tried to instill. Yet, to his surprise, the opposite seemed to happen. Even in the height of her success, when cameras followed her every move and her face appeared on billboards, she never seemed comfortable with being the center of attention. She made time for young fans, often kneeling down to speak to them eye to eye after games, remembering their names, their stories, and the spark of hope that glowed when she handed them a signed ball or a hug. "I don't want to just be known as a basketball player," she told him one night during her junior year at Iowa, sitting on the same porch where they had spoken years earlier. "I want to do something that matters beyond the court." Brent had turned away quickly, hiding tears he didn't expect to fall, realizing that she was beginning to understand what he'd always hoped she would. The Caitlin Clark Foundation was born from that realization, a natural evolution of her desire to give back to the communities that had shaped her. She didn't launch it with celebrity fanfare or media spectacle. Instead, she built it quietly, deliberately, determined to ensure every grant made a real impact. Education, nutrition, youth sports, these became its pillars, not because they were fashionable causes, but because Caitlin saw in them the very things that had sustained her own journey. She knew the importance of a full meal before practice, the relief of having a supportive coach, the difference a scholarship could make for a family under pressure. She personally read every application, often late into the night after games, her empathy sharpening her focus more than any film study or playbook ever had. "Tell me about this family," she would say to her team as she went through the files, wanting to understand each story, each struggle, each hope. Brent often watched from the sidelines, quietly observing how his daughter had become a woman whose compassion reached far beyond her sport. On that January night, as snow whispered softly a guy, the windows and the kitchen filled with the golden glow of lamplight, he was overwhelmed by the memory of that promise. He saw, in that quiet act of service, the fulfillment of everything he had ever wished for her. All the early mornings, the pressure, the sacrifices, they had not been for trophies or fame. They had been preparation for this, for Caitlin to use her light to guide others through the dark. What no one else knew was that Brent had once feared the very intensity that made her great. As a child, Caitlin was relentless, driven, unable to settle for good enough. He worried that her perfectionism might someday harden into ego. Yet now, watching her smile gently at a handwritten letter from a young girl in rural Iowa thanking the foundation for providing sports equipment to her school, he realized her intensity had never been about self-glory. It was about purpose. He remembered something his own father had told him once, that the greatest gift a parent can receive is to see their child become not what the world expects, but what their soul was meant to be. As he looked at Caitlin that night, Brent understood that the promise he had made all those years ago had not just been fulfilled, it had been surpassed. His daughter had become not only a symbol of athletic greatness, but a living example of grace, empathy, and service. In her success, she had found humility. In her fame, she had found purpose. When she finally noticed him standing there and smiled, it was not the smile of a celebrity, but of a daughter who had unknowingly answered her father's silent prayer. And in that moment, Brent Clark knew that the story of his family, their sacrifices, their faith, their long journey through courts and seasons, was never just about basketball. It was about love,
and then just, I couldn't even imagine my younger self being where I am right now.
In the soft glow of the kitchen light on a snowy January evening in West Des Moines, Caitlin Clark sat surrounded by letters. Her foundation's latest grant applications spread across the table like stories waiting to be heard. Brent watched quietly from the doorway, his heart swelling as he saw his daughter pause over a handwritten letter from a single mother pleading for help with her son's education. What's their story? How can we make the biggest difference in their lives? Caitlin asked softly, her tone full of empathy. She moved on to another letter, this one from a family whose little girl needed urgent medical treatment they couldn't afford. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "She's only 8, Dad. She loves basketball, but her family can't even afford her surgery. How's that fair?" Brent stepped closer, placing his hand gently on her shoulder, the same reassuring touch that had guided her through countless practices and heartbreaks. But tonight, the gesture carried a different weight. "Caitlin," he said, voice trembling, "this is bigger than basketball. Watching you care more about helping others than about your own success. This is who you were always meant to be."